November 1942, North Atlantic. Midnight hung like a shadow over the rolling black waves, and a thick fog swallowed the horizon. Only the low hum of distant engines and the occasional creak of steel betrayed the passage of German convoys, gliding through what they believed to be untracked waters. On board the bridge of U-582, the officers squinted into the darkness, confident in the cover of night and the silence that had shielded their predecessors. The Atlantic was theirs to hunt. Allied ships were thought to be ghosts, scattered and defenseless. Yet, unseen far beyond their line of sight, a faint pulse of energy swept silently over the ocean. A technological heartbeat, imperceptible, yet deadly precise. American radar stations, born from months of relentless engineering, scanned the waters with an unblinking gaze. No explosions yet, no warning flares, just the quiet inevitability of observation. And as the night deepened, entire convoys would vanish from German sight, leaving officers stunned, their assumptions shattered by a force they could not see but could not ignore. The stage was set for a confrontation of ingenuity against expectation, silence against certainty. By late 1942, the Atlantic Ocean had become the lifeblood of the Allied war effort. Convoys carried vital supplies, food, fuel, weapons, and men, from the United States to the embattled United Kingdom, sustaining not only military operations, but the fragile survival of nations resisting Axis conquest. For the German Kriegsmarine, this network of supply lines represented opportunity, a vast moving target for the U-boat arm, the Unterseeboot fleet that had become the nightmare of Allied sailors. Over the previous 2 years, Wolfpack tactics had inflicted devastating losses, sinking hundreds of ships with torpedoes and surface attacks. German officers, accustomed to striking under cover of darkness, believed their dominance of the Atlantic unchallenged. But the tide was quietly turning. Across the ocean, American engineers and naval strategists had invested in a new kind of weapon, one invisible to the naked eye, yet capable of scanning miles of open water. Radar technology, still in its infancy, was refined through months of experimentation at laboratories in New York, Massachusetts, and the shores of the Chesapeake. The devices could detect the shape of a ship, its speed, its course, even under the cloak of fog or the black of night. By autumn 1942, the U.S. Navy had deployed mobile radar units along the convoy routes, integrating them with escort ships and aircraft patrols. Reports from early trials revealed startling accuracy, providing commanders with knowledge that German submarines could not anticipate. German intelligence intercepted occasional radio chatter, but could not fathom the scope of this silent surveillance. Officers expected their convoys to glide through the Atlantic largely undisturbed, relying on stealth, darkness, and experience honed from years of hunting Allied vessels. What they did not yet understand was that a new dimension of warfare had emerged, one in which technology, precision, and American industrial might would begin to challenge their very assumptions about control and dominance at sea. The quiet of November nights would soon be pierced not by explosions alone, but by a revelation of American ingenuity that would leave German officers stunned and entire convoys disappearing without a trace. The American radar systems deployed in 1942 were more than mere instruments. They were the culmination of an industrial and scientific revolution, a testament to relentless research and coordination. Ships equipped with the latest SCR-268 and SG-series radar could detect vessels and U-boats at ranges previously thought impossible, even under conditions that had once guaranteed German stealth. Engineers had refined the antenna arrays to rotate with uncanny precision, and operators trained tirelessly to interpret blips on dim screens, translating abstract dots into actionable intelligence. Every pulse sent across the Atlantic waves represented hours of labor in laboratories, workshops, and naval yards, a network of human ingenuity that German officers could neither see nor anticipate. Meanwhile, the U-boat command relied on traditional scouting techniques. Submarines surfaced to report positions via encrypted radio, plotted convoy courses using dead reckoning, and depended on intelligence reports that were increasingly fragmented. German officers anticipated predictable patterns in Allied supply lines, convinced that they could intercept or evade as they had before. The confidence was palpable. Patrol logs reveal officers noting routine convoy movement and expected minimal resistance during night watches. Yet, the invisible eyes of American radar did not merely observe, they informed a new level of tactical precision. Escort ships adjusted courses before contact, aircraft were vectored to intercept unseen targets, and commanders could orchestrate ambushes with near-perfect timing. In late November, early deployments along the mid-Atlantic Gap, once a sanctuary for German submarines, began recording losses that confounded even experienced commanders. Convoys previously considered vulnerable yet elusive were now visible, trackable, and, in some cases, entirely shielded from attack. The German officers' perception of dominance collided with an American reality. Technology had introduced a new battlefield dimension. Where once darkness was a veil of protection, it had become a stage for surveillance. The Atlantic, vast and indifferent, was now mapped by human ingenuity, and the silent pulse of radar was the herald of a turning tide. That November, as waves broke quietly against convoy hulls, the Kriegsmarine began to sense that an unseen force was rewriting the rules of naval warfare. From the human perspective, the contrast could not have been more striking. On board the U-boats, German officers relied on decades of naval tradition, keen eyesight, calculated positioning, and disciplined radio protocols. The officers prided themselves on their intuition, the ability to read the ocean and the skies for signs of Allied movement. Yet as the first convoys vanished under the silent sweep of radar, logbooks recorded bewildered entries. No contact, no trace. Impossible. The invisible hand of technology had disrupted their expectations, leaving men trained to dominate the seas staring into an unseen enemy. Morale faltered quietly, a slow recognition that something unprecedented had entered the war. From a tactical angle, radar altered the choreography of combat. Convoy escorts could now shadow German submarines without being detected, anticipating strikes before they occurred. Air patrols were vectored precisely to intercept, often arriving before a torpedo was even launched. German wolf packs, once masters of the night, found themselves reacting to events they could neither predict nor understand. Every maneuver became tentative, every calculation shadowed by uncertainty, while American commanders leveraged information in real time to protect vital supply lines. Technologically, the innovation was breathtaking. The SG and SCR-268 radars transmitted high-frequency pulses that reflected off ships' metal hulls, painting an invisible picture across dark waters. Operators interpreted these echoes with precision, estimating course, speed, and tonnage. The system's reliability exceeded expectations, even in turbulent seas or fog, and American engineers continued refining it as deployment expanded. For the Kriegsmarine, it was a revelation and a threat, an unseen eye capable of penetrating the very heart of their operations, making their previous advantages obsolete. Leadership played a decisive role in translating this technology into battlefield dominance. American naval commanders integrated radar readings into strategy, rerouting convoys, organizing patrols, and intercepting U-boats with calculated timing. Each successful engagement reinforced confidence, while German command struggled to adapt, their orders often based on outdated assumptions and incomplete intelligence. From the enemy's perspective, the psychological impact was profound. German officers, accustomed to dictating terms of engagement, were confronted with a reality that undermined centuries of naval doctrine. Reports from U-boat crews reveal a growing sense of frustration and disbelief. Sightings missed, targets disappeared, and ambushes foiled by forces they could not see. The invisible surveillance of American radar challenged not only tactical assumptions, but also deeply held notions of control and mastery over the Atlantic. Night, once a sanctuary, had become a domain of vulnerability, and even the most seasoned officers were forced to question whether experience alone could ensure survival. On a moral and ideological level, The technological edge embodied a broader reflection of American industrial power and ingenuity. Radar was not merely a tool. It was a symbol of a nation capable of transforming intellect and labor into decisive advantage. Where Axis commanders relied on brute force and tradition, the Americans demonstrated that innovation, organization, and foresight could outmatch even the most disciplined opponents. This juxtaposition revealed a fundamental shift. The future of warfare belonged not only to strength of arms, but to the mastery of knowledge and the clever application of science. The human and technological angles intertwined with leadership and tactical execution to produce an unprecedented effect. American task force commanders, aware of the capabilities radar afforded, coordinated actions with precision. Convoys were rerouted to exploit gaps, escorts positioned to shield the most vulnerable ships, and air support timed to intercept with calculated accuracy. German officers, meanwhile, reacted, often overcompensating in confusion, their strategies based on assumptions no longer valid. Even small objects, the radar blips on green screens, the steady pulse of antennas scanning the waves, became symbols of unseen power. For German officers, they represented the futility of expectation. For Americans, they signaled mastery, coordination, and the quiet dominance of ingenuity over assumption. Each angle reinforced the reality. A silent revolution in naval warfare had begun, one that would leave entire convoys vanishing under the cover of darkness. November 26, 1942. The night air over the North Atlantic was heavy with mist, each wave rolling like a dark phantom beneath the moonless sky. A convoy of 32 merchant vessels moved steadily, unaware that their every motion was being observed. Radar operators aboard the USS Brooklyn and the escorting destroyers traced the silhouettes of each ship, converting faint blips into actionable intelligence. The German U-boat command had dispatched 8 submarines to intercept, confident that darkness and fog would conceal their approach. By 02:15 hours, the first U-boat, U-582, had positioned itself along the convoy's anticipated path. Officers on the bridge noted only faint intermittent signals of movement, entirely unaware that radar had already logged their location. As they maneuvered into firing range, American destroyers had already adjusted positions, maintaining the illusion of absence. The first torpedo fired missed entirely, guided by blind assumptions rather than information. The American radar pulses, imperceptible to the human eye, had orchestrated a silent countermeasure. Aircraft overhead, vectored precisely by radar data, approached unseen, prepared to strike at the exact moment the U-boat revealed itself. Confusion spread quickly among German crews. Orders were delayed, positions misjudged, and panic crept in as commanders realized that their maps and calculations no longer guaranteed certainty. One log entry would later read, "Everything we expected did not happen. The convoy behaves as though invisible to us." The Atlantic, long thought a domain they could master, had become an arena where the unseen hand of American technology dictated events, reshaping both strategy and perception. By 0300 hours, the full extent of radar's power became undeniable. American aircraft, guided by precise readings, descended upon the convoy, illuminating targets with searchlights and dropping depth charges on U-boat positions that had believed themselves hidden. Several submarines were forced to surface in panic, their crews scrambling to evade detection. Torpedoes fired in confidence found only empty water, missing ships that had subtly altered course under radar guidance. German officers, trained to expect decisive advantage in the night, were now reacting to a reality they could not see, their experience rendered ineffective. Across the convoy lanes, entire groups of ships vanished from U-boat targeting altogether. Logs from American destroyers recorded the seamless interception of enemy submarines, while merchant vessels continued unharmed, shielded by information invisible to the enemy. The pulse of radar, quiet and relentless, orchestrated movement, timing, and engagement with precision that human calculation alone could not match. Each vanished target, each frustrated attack, reinforced the psychological shock that spread silently through the German command. By 04:30 hours, the engagement concluded. No single battle had erupted. There were no thunderous explosions on the scale of traditional naval encounters. Yet the outcome was total. The convoy pressed on, intact, while German officers confronted the unsettling truth that their unseen opponents had controlled the engagement from beginning to end. Entire doctrines of night attack and stealth had been rendered obsolete in a single, silent night. In those hours, the Atlantic had been transformed, not by brute force, but by invisible vision and unwavering precision, a quiet revolution of technological dominance. The immediate consequences of that November night were striking. Convoys that might once have suffered devastating losses traversed the Atlantic largely unscathed, delivering critical supplies to Britain at a scale that altered the course of operations in North Africa and Western Europe. American naval records note that losses among merchant ships fell significantly compared to prior months, while U-boat patrol logs revealed a rising sense of confusion and frustration. One German officer wrote bluntly in his report, "The sea no longer answers our commands. The enemy watches all, yet remains unseen." For the Kriegsmarine, accustomed to nocturnal supremacy, the experience was unprecedented. The statistical impact was immediate and quantifiable. Between November and December 1942, convoys protected by radar-equipped escorts reported a 40% reduction in sinkings, a dramatic shift in a theater defined by attrition. Allied commanders gained confidence in the technology, recognizing that the combination of radar guidance, coordinated tactics, and precise aerial patrols created a nearly unbreakable defensive web. Ships that might previously have been sitting ducks now moved under the invisible shield of intelligence. Every course adjustment and timing calculated to counter German expectations. Yet the most profound effect was psychological. German officers, trained to exploit uncertainty, confronted the unsettling reality that their advantage in night operations had evaporated. The silent, constant observation of American radar introduced a form of pressure unlike any they had previously faced. A sense of omnipresence that undermined confidence in both planning and instinct. The traditional hierarchy of skill and experience, honed over years of naval engagement, was suddenly insufficient. Even minor details, such as the soft pulse of radar screens and the disciplined timing of American signals, became symbols of this transformation. German officers began to acknowledge, often in private logs, that the Atlantic could no longer be dominated through stealth alone. The unseen technology had imposed a new reality, one in which invisibility no longer guaranteed safety, and entire doctrines of warfare had to be reconsidered. The longer-term repercussions of radar's deployment in the Atlantic extended beyond immediate tactical victories. German Naval Command, faced with repeated failures to intercept convoys, began revising submarine patrol routes and engagement strategies. Reports from the Kriegsmarine indicate an increasing reliance on intelligence that was often outdated or incomplete, creating hesitation where decisiveness had once been the norm. Officers debated the viability of traditional wolf pack tactics, recognizing that American technology had effectively rendered predictable patterns obsolete. In several instances, commanders delayed attacks for hours, hoping to anticipate radar coverage, a strategy that frequently proved futile. American confidence, by contrast, soared. Naval leadership understood that the combination of technology and trained operators could dictate the flow of battle without exposing ships to unnecessary risk. Radar became a force multiplier, allowing smaller escort groups to protect convoys with remarkable efficiency. Coordination with aircraft further amplified effectiveness, creating a seamless, integrated defense system that German officers could neither penetrate nor predict. Reports from November and December 1942 chronicle numerous incidents where entire U-boat groups failed to make contact, their patrols ending in frustration and diminished morale. The symbolic impact was equally profound. Radar, an invisible yet pervasive presence, represented the United States' capacity to translate scientific knowledge into practical, decisive advantage. Where German officers expected fear and vulnerability among the enemy, they instead encountered preparedness, foresight, and an almost preternatural situational awareness. Convoys moved like clockwork under an unseen watch, while the Atlantic, once a vast arena of uncertainty, had become a landscape shaped by American ingenuity and precision. By the end of 1942, the Kriegsmarine recognized a harsh truth. Stealth and experience were no longer sufficient. The Atlantic had become a domain in which the unseen force of technology could determine outcomes before a single torpedo was fired. Entire doctrines, once considered unassailable, had been disrupted in a single silent revolution. And for those officers forced to confront this reality, the night of November 26th would remain a stark reminder that unseen eyes could govern the fate of men and machines alike. In the quiet aftermath, as the Atlantic waves rolled steadily under the moonless sky, the events of that night revealed a profound truth about the nature of modern warfare. It was not only firepower or numbers that determined victory, but the mastery of information, precision, and foresight. American radar, silent yet omnipresent, had reshaped the battlefield, demonstrating that technology could protect life, dictate strategy, and challenge even the most seasoned adversaries. Entire convoys moved as if guided by an unseen hand, while German officers confronted the unsettling realization that their experience, intuition, and tradition were insufficient against an invisible opponent. The symbolic power of radar extended beyond its tactical application. Each green blip on a screen, each measured pulse sent across the Atlantic, became a metaphor for American abundance, not of material wealth, but of intellectual and industrial resources harnessed with extraordinary discipline. Where Axis officers expected scarcity, vulnerability, and fear among their adversaries, they instead found preparedness, ingenuity, and quiet resilience. The invisible technology embodied a national ethos, the ability to convert knowledge, labor, and creativity into decisive advantage, a principle that would continue to shape the war's outcome across theaters. Yet beyond strategy and statistics, there is a human dimension. For the sailors aboard merchant vessels, radar offered unseen protection, a shield against uncertainty, allowing them to deliver essential supplies under conditions that had once been almost hopeless. For the German officers, it introduced awe, shock, and a reluctant respect for ingenuity that could outmatch brute force. In the rhythm of waves and the steady pulse of antennas, one witnesses the interplay between human expectation and technological reality, a lesson in humility and adaptation. Ultimately, the night of November 26, 1942, stands as a testament to the quiet power of innovation and the enduring truth that control over information is control over destiny. In the Atlantic, as across history, those who anticipate, observe, and adapt shape outcomes far beyond the immediate moment. The vanished convoys were not merely ships. They were symbols of a new era, one in which intelligence, invention, and perseverance could protect life, preserve freedom, and redefine the rules of engagement. And in that silent mastery of the unseen, the human story of courage, ingenuity, and survival is written across the waves, permanent as the ocean itself.